So today, Europe, Agents of Revolution, 1750 to 1914. We're really going to rock out the 1800s, the 19th century, and then I'll start teaching a lot more about, I think, World War I and World War II tomorrow and the next day with historic, and then I'm going to probably do something. I haven't figured out yet what I want to do with you guys. I might do the Iranian Revolution or the Arab Spring, something like that the next day. All right, so let's hit it. As usual, you probably just want to write down what the highlights that I point out. I know that Stork went over this with you before, but it's very important to review. In the 1750s, Europe across the board is following an economic system called mercantilism. And mercantilism is something that you really should be familiar with before walking into that testing environment. And what it means is that the foundation of this philosophy is if one nation benefits, another nation suffers. So the point is to win, win, win. Okay, how do you win, win, win? Well, you exclude all outside competitors from your national market. How do you do that? You raise tariffs. You guys know what a tariff is, right? Tax on goods coming into your country, tariffs. Okay, so you raise tariffs, and the goal is to monopolize all the wealth. So you wanted, and the government does everything it can in a system like this to support domestic manufacturing. So you want the internal economy should be fully supported by the government. That's also a mercantile system, fully supported. So you give trade incentive to local producers. You bar outside trade. And then, this is the real key to understanding world events, you support colonization of other lands and imperialism so that you can exploit the raw materials of other places and bring them home. So, okay, now the French were the biggest proponents of this. And the French make a lot of their moves in the African markets. Okay, now on the opposite end of the spectrum, and this is where the Americans are going to fall big time, and to a limited extent, sometimes the British and the Dutch, is free traders. Okay, free traders. Like I said, this philosophy is followed by the Americans, the British, the Dutch. And that means, hey, let everyone compete freely. Let everyone compete freely. And
those M&Ms and not share any.
Yeah, and industry will thrive. Let everyone compete in the markets freely, and industry will thrive through competition. This is basically capitalism. Free markets equal capitalism. Okay, and Adam Smith, the father of capitalism, was a real proponent of free markets. Adam Smith, who wrote The Wealth of Nations. Okay, so the free market model is what works the best. By 1914, Britain was the number one wealthy country on the planet, and the United States was third. Germany, which is second, practiced free markets too in most cases. So that really is the economic model that's going to work for the Europeans. So, and the main thing to remember, while we wait for these guys to finish, is that the mercantilism relies a lot on exploitation of other cultures, whereas free trade really relies more on competition for the markets of other cultures. Now, does that mean that the UK didn't practice both? Britain practiced both, but the free market approach really does work well. Okay, hit it. All right, so by 1750, here's what it looks like in the world. The domestic trade, okay, most of commerce in each nation, European nation, is internal. Okay? Because the workers and the farmers, the majority of the working population, do not produce for export. They're producing for internal markets. Mercantilism in 1750 is the dominant economic system on Earth. I don't want you to write all this down, but there's a pattern going on here. Okay, so what you need to realize is that Western Europe and Eastern Asia are producing finished products, like the whole chair, the whole plate, the whole shirt, the whole pair of pants, maybe the whole suit. Okay, they're finished products. Everyone else is, and that's what Western Europe and China are exporting finished products. Okay, everyone else is exporting raw materials. Raw materials to be made into finished products by these powerhouses, Western Europe and Eastern Asia. Okay, so raw materials are coming in. The other thing that's really big time by 1750 is the triangular trade. Okay, now this is a grave mistake to not know what this is, because we actually had an essay on it one year. Triangular trade is the exchange of European finished products, to Africa in exchange for humans, which are affectionately known as enslaved people, to work in plantations in the Americas. So the humans are sold in the Americas, and then they are forced to grow sugar, tobacco, indigo, which is then sold to the Europeans. Mainly sugar. So if you look at the exports of Eastern Europe, minerals, primary products, grains, that means like crops. Americas, minerals, primary products, cash crops. Eastern Asia, they don't have to worry about it. But Africa, slaves, ivory, gold, clothes. All right, hit it. Okay, so it looks a lot like this. So you'll see, out of the Indian Ocean, you've got a lot of luxury goods: coffee, silk, gems, calicos, pearls, cottons, gems, pepper, coffee, spices. Luxury, luxury, luxury. Silk, porcelain, tea, lacquerware, and spices, luxury. And out of here, you've got human capital flowing across here. Then you've got raw minerals flowing out of the colonies: silver, gold, slaves, sugar, tobacco, timber, all raw materials, furs. Okay, and then the industrial areas are producing those manufactured goods and sending them back out into the world as finished products. All right, hit it. Okay. By 1914, the situation has somewhat changed. Okay, at this point, all regions are producing all types of product, with the whole world involved. That's the change from 1750 to 1914. Now the continuity is that the majority of the nations that had been colonized by 1914 are still only producing raw materials for the markets. There's your continuity. But you've got finished products flowing all over the world too. Okay, there's this weird thing that happens by 1914 too. Wealthy countries trade with other wealthy countries, and the poor countries don't trade at all. Okay, and what most nations want then is most favored nations status in trade, which means they get favorable terms of trade, which means usually lower tariffs, lower taxes on bringing their goods into a certain market. Okay, by 1914, you see the first multinational corporations thriving. Now, this is different than the British East India Company going and colonizing India and then bringing stuff back. These are corporations that set up in other nations to do business in many other nations for those nations. So providing services and goods to other nations instead of just exploiting them. What does the spread of multinational corporations do? It facilitates the exchange of technologies, social organization in the form of how corporations work, and ideas and people. Now the thing about the international economic scene of 1914 is it starts killing cultures. Okay, indigenous cultures fall by the wayside when these international cultures sweep in and impose themselves on the local cultures. So we see a massive die-off of cultures from 1914 still going on today. Hit it. All right, so here's what the world of trade looks like in 1914. A little more complex. Yeah? Yeah. All of the blue lines are main trade routes. Okay. All the red lines are manufactured goods that are flowing, like finished products. Okay. You see, the Americas by 1914, all that light green, that is free countries, right? You see the layout. So who lost the most in the 1800s? Which European colonizer? Spain lost the most, okay? Spain lost the most. Portugal lost a pretty good chunk itself, though, with Brazil. Britain is mainly centered where? Indian Ocean world. The British really paid attention to this part of the world the most, right? After they rode off North America, they picked up Canada to serve as a base there, but still. You see, France is mainly focused where? West Africa. Now remember, France just wants to shoot goods into their economy in a mercantile system that Colbert developed, and this is close. Okay, Germany, is Germany a big winner in the colonial game?
Not really.
Look at Germany. Germany's really hurting. Only 3 different regions in Africa. You've got some presence down here in Southeast Asia, but not much. So Germany, one trade port here. So Germany really does suffer in the game. And that's going to be an issue in the 1880s. When the Germans unify in the 1880s, that's going to be a serious issue. The Germans are going to want a piece of this pie that's being laid out. And then everybody else falls in underneath that. Okay, go ahead.
1880s or 1980s?
1880s.
Okay.
Germany isn't unified as a nation until the 1880s, and neither is Italy. They're really late to the bloomers because they were all the German princes. They were never unified, and Italy was all the city-states. So those are really going to come in the late 1800s. But once they pop out, man, the Austrians and the Prussians and the Germans, they come out like gangbusters under Bismarck. They start making ships. They start threatening everybody. The fear of Germany is a major reason for World War I, in the British eyes at least, you know. So competition can be harsh. All right, another thing happens in Europe in the 1750s. It's called the Second Agricultural Revolution. Of course, the first agricultural revolution was 8,000 BC, you know. So now the Second Agricultural Revolution. This feeds more population, which leads to mass industrialization. Food equals population equals industrialization. Okay, it begins in England, but then it quickly spreads to Western Europe, the United States, and Asia. And it is a direct result of the Columbian Exchange. The direct result of the Columbian Exchange. And you saw what this did in Asia, in my lectures at least. They went from 80 million people to 300 million people in 300 years from the introduction of American food crops. That's what the Columbian Exchange is all about, exchanging plants, ideas, animals, and people between Africa, Europe, and the New World, the Americas. This is also the application of science to agriculture. The application of science to agriculture. Okay, so the steps that led to this: 1, the Enclosure Act. Okay, this is with the support of governments. This happened all over Western Europe. The Enclosure Act was rich individuals closing down public lands in order to raise animals on those lands. So kicking the peasants off of the land. Okay. What does this do? Well, it takes farmers, creates corporate farming, like business farming, first of all, and it gets inefficient farmers, the peasants, off the land. Okay, now they're looking for jobs. They wander to the cities. Who's waiting to hire them in the cities? The manufacturing. Okay, and these guys are dirt poor anyway. They're used to being dirt poor. They're going to stay dirt poor. They're going to take the low wages that fueled the Industrial Revolution. You see how A equals B equals C? Rich guys want to get richer. Take the land away from the poor people. Poor people move to the city. Rich guys are there with factories. Put the people in the factories. Pay them very little. Everybody's happy. Well, except for the peasants.
Except for the peasants' wives.
Yeah. Communist revolutions are coming. That's an answer that wasn't an answer. All right. So a lot of the governments around Europe supported this enclosure movement. It was a big deal. So the result was, like I said, factory labor. So the revolution, well, there's a lot of new foods being planted all over the world. They start to selectively breed from the best animals. So you have animal production increasing. And you see the application of science to farming techniques for the first time. Okay, now what's interesting too is as the Europeans spread around the world, the Europeans also bring their crops and their animals and take over new ecological zones all over the planet. So that's going to really alter the Earth as we know it. The Earth that you would have seen in 1450 is not what you would look at today. Even down to the plant life, the geography, the topography, everything. 2 different planets. You go ahead and hit it. Okay, so we have the birth of the cash crop is what it's called. That's the second agricultural revolution gives us the cash crop. Okay, I really don't need you to write anything down here, but just know that machines were replacing muscle. You knew that though. And new techniques for preserving food are being invented. Now this is really weird. For the first time in history, we have cultures that are importing food to sustain their cultures. Never before have we seen massive amounts of food be shipped across the planet until 1750s onward with the second agricultural revolution. So that's new. That's really new. Yeah. On the other hand, so what happens? This is the commercial farming happens in Western Europe. Our country, Canada, Argentina, Brazil, Uruguay, the Aussies, New Zealand, India, China, and Japan. Okay? But the flip side, and this is going to cause a lot of cultural problems later on, the flip side is that the common peasant becomes a wage laborer, which is a severe loss of freedom. Whereas the common peasant used to be a subsistence farmer. Did you figure it out, Ryan?
Yeah, I got it.
Were you going to work on it or in here? Or you just...
Yeah, I was with mom.
Okay, maybe tomorrow.
Yes, sir.
All right. So the common labor is a wage labor, and they're not making much in wages. So what we see is the majority of the population from 1750 on, in Europe especially, is experiencing more leisure time. Seems like they have more freedom, but they have less freedom than they had when they were just farming the land. Okay? And there's going to be some real hiccups in all the Western European nations where they play with communism and then they have a few revolutions even. And I'm not a Bredberg, I'm not advocating communism, as strongly as he is, because it just turned into dictatorships in Russia and China, so we haven't actually seen what a communist system would look like.
Do you think if a communist system came to a country that's really developed, if it came to the United States, would it be able to work?
I don't know. There's so much room for hijacking. Yeah. But communism doesn't look that much different than democratic republicanism, where you have representatives from each Comintern that come in and make group decisions. And isn't that what a democracy is about, theoretically? Theoretically, I know.
Human nature comes in and people like Trump
and
get in
corporate
office.
culture and everything else, greed. But theoretically, it could. I think it would be worth a spin. Why not?
We'd be the country to get through.
Nothing's working right now really well, so I can see with that being an option. I don't know.
Also, communism isn't back behind large corporations.
Well, see, that's the weird thing. China's got a new kind of communism that seems to be working for them right now, which is communist capitalism. I don't know what it is. We're still studying it to try to figure out what it is, because since Mao Zedong died in '74, the dictator of China, Deng Xiaoping took over. He was a military general, had already been under house arrest by Mao, and started doing slow economic reforms. So the country started getting richer pretty fast. And then by like 82 or 84, I can't remember right off the top of my head when Tiananmen Square happened, where the kids in China were like, democracy, and the government was like, screw you guys, and like killed a bunch of teenagers and young college kids and arrested hundreds more. Said, no democracy movement. We'll make you rich, but you can't have democracy. So they've come down pretty firm on that, you know. But as far as where they're going to stop with the economics, it's interesting.
What do you think would happen if, like, you know, the United States were to become like completely socialist, not communist, or completely democratic republican?
We'd look a lot like France.
Is France working?
France is socialist.
France is,
Yeah.
they get like
that work?
all of the time off.
They have all the time off. They get so many weeks off a year. So, yeah, 35 hours a week, I think is their work week.
Well, yeah, but
they
isn't
have
that
really
like
good programs.
mandatory because they have chronic unemployment?
They have some, yeah, Europe.
Huh?
European countries have that, especially France, like Grand Theft.
Yeah. All right, go ahead and hit
One of
it.
the requirements.
All right. So between 1750 and 1914, what we see is the birth of the cash crop industry. Okay. Now, really, the two things that slowed down this process were the need for labor. It was labor intensive. How do you solve that? Slavery. So 1750 on, we see slavery is a big deal for the next 100 years in the United States. And then technology. Once slavery isn't the solution anymore, then technology. Okay, so this kind of commercial agriculture starts in the 1500s with colonialism of the Americas. So it's a long timeline, 1500s on. The Spanish immediately start setting up plantations, sugar plantations, and start cash crops, okay, which is super important to them. It's expanded by the 1700s. Okay, the British get it on the gig. Okay, the British get on the gig, and they start to add tobacco and indigo and rice. Okay, they start farming, you know, big things like trees. Okay, and pitch for tar and such. So mining and such. Asia added tea, coffee, opium, and cloves. And then the Americans added cocoa and coffee. So these are cash crops. Uh-huh.
So was opium sold as a luxury, or like?
Huh?
Was opium sold as like a luxury or like a medicine or?
It was sold as a drug.
So like drug. Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah, like drugs.
Just like.
Like nobody was lying about it. They were like opium. You smoke it, you get high, you get hooked, and you die. Yeah. But yeah, everybody was doing opium for a while. Apparently that was the thing. The worst affected, because of the Industrial Revolution, the worst affected continent, okay, out of all the continents was Africa. Okay, we see well over 10 million Africans violently persecuted by being kidnapped and dragged out of their continent to work painful lives in other places. Okay, go ahead and hit it. Oh, go back. Go back. Sorry. Now, don't forget they always ask this as one of the multiple choice questions on the test, so don't forget that the Spanish set up their labor system under what's called the the Mita system, M-I''T-A, Mita system in South America, which is based on the Inca work labor requirements. So the Inca Indians said, you know, every village has to give a certain amount of labor, a certain amount of time every year, and every village does. That's how the Spanish used the Inca system. And then the encomienda system, which is large gifts of land and ranches to powerful families in Mexico. The encomienda system for the Mexicans.
Mr. Jensen,
Uh-huh.
what do you mean by industrial revolution made additional possible more?
Did I say that? Those three words?
It's on the slide.
Yeah, made additional possible more.
Oh,
Just
Typo. Made additional production
Oh, okay.
possible more.
Okay,
Production. Thank you. Okay, so what that means though is you could take something like cotton, right, which used to just be cotton, okay, and then you can do, because of the Industrial Revolution, you can take that cotton seed, right, you can press it and you can make it into a synthetic oil that actually works as a grease for machine, or you can make it as an ingredient in rubber. So you can use a plant in multiple different ways for multiple different applications when the plant used to be just for one thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because the machines are able to process. You can can meat. So now for the first time in history, you can take a cow and eat it 8 months later. It's kind of gross in my book, but you know, I hate canned meat. It just bugs me to think about it. Even tuna fish, it's been sitting in that can for like 8 months. It's like, you were a dead fish 8 months ago. Why am I eating you?
Have you ever had those like sausages? I don't know what they're called.
Yeah, Vienna sausages. Yeah, those are disgusting too. We can go through a whole list of disgusting things. All right.
Don't do that. I cannot handle gefilte fish.
I'm not. Oh, gefilte fish? No, I do like that. All right, hit it. All right. The first revolution is the Industrial Revolution. Okay, in all the changes and everything. So far as social revolutions, the Industrial Revolution. Okay. Starts really in the 1780s with real big breakthroughs in productivity. Mechanization, the design of factories, super important. And what it leads to, because you need less human capital once you build the machines, it leads to dramatic drops in prices of common goods. It leads to dramatic drops in prices of common goods. Because also, most of your goods that you're producing are not expendable right away. So that means that you can sell them over time. Like canned meat. Yummers. Okay. Now, what led to this Industrial Revolution? Well, the Scientific Revolution, the Commercial Revolution, the Agricultural Revolution, and the Enlightenment. Okay, and this is what results from the Industrial Revolution. First of all, you see massive markets be produced. Massive markets, like planet-wide markets. You see a really sophisticated organization of the workplace. Okay, you see a rapid, it's called a catalytic cycle, but a rapid increase in technologies and their invention. One invention leads to another invention leads to another, and it just keeps tumbling on top of each other rapidly. Okay, you also see a lot of investment in European infrastructure, in European nations, because the monies from the colonies is making them filthy rich. Because where are you selling the industrialized products back to? Your colonies. It's an internal loop. So everybody who owns colonies is taking the raw materials from the colonies, taking the raw materials back to their home country, making goods out of it, and selling it back to the colonies for an increased price. Exploitation is awesome. Yeah, that's the way to get rich.
Slytherins in government.
A lot of Slytherins in government, yeah. And then you also get a real rise in people insisting on voices in their government. So across the world, what you see is constitutional democracies are growing as one option of government. Not the only option, but the desire is for that over time in many places. And really, Adam Smith was the forefather of this, but he's like hands off for the government, laissez-faire government. Okay, government should not get involved with the economic issues. Right? Right? Okay, go ahead and hit it. I think in a minute, we'll stop with the Industrial Revolution. I can do the rest later. So maybe just 2 more slides. Okay, so the first thing you need, the Western European world was fueling its first Industrial Revolution solely on wood power. Okay, well, that means they deforested every forest in Europe, literally. So they chopped down all the trees. Whoopsie. So what do we need? We need a new thing to fuel the fires of industry. that new thing was found in England first in huge amounts called coal. You heat up water and you put it in a pressurized tank so the steam has nowhere to go, and then the steam builds up and builds up and builds up, and you put a tube there and shoot the steam through a little tiny space, and it just goes woo, and then starts turning wheels and stuff. It's cool. You use coal for that. It's called a boiler.
Did they like purposely find that, or was it like that?
They invented it. Yeah, purposely. They knew that steam, like all you need is a tea kettle to know that steam is gonna like pop the lid off the tea kettle if it's not, you know, really wedged down there. And so it was kind of a no-brainer. They just trying to figure out a system. How do you make that much heat? You know, if you try to use wood, you do what they did, and you'll burn through a whole forest, you know, and then you don't have any trees left, you know, which they did that already. And then they were like, well, we're out of wood, crud. And then they found coal, you know, and they're like, hey, coal burns. Let's burn coal. And they found out they had a lot of coal. Okay? And then they found out it made things black and terrible, and then they went to nuclear. And they found out that blows up and irradiates the entire population, so they went to solar. And then they went to water, or wind. All right, okay. So, I already talked about the markets. Cotton, oh my gosh. So the first industry that really was industrialized was the cotton spinning industry. This was a massively labor-intensive industry. You had thousands and thousands of people, and not to mention all the little girls and stuff that had to work. If the putting out system was how it started, and that means that everybody, you get all the cotton from India. It comes in big bales, and then you put it down. First you have to clean it, then you have to spin it into string, then you have to take this string, and then you have to loom it. You have to finish it. It's just so many stages of the process. They were like, geez, there's got to be a better way. Everybody needs new clothes all the time. You know, that ketchup thing, mustard doesn't really come out. So you always buy new stuff like that. So it starts in 1733, and by 1785, they've got really high-powered, fast, water-powered looms. Okay, the second thing that was super important to all this was 1765, James Watt invented the steam engine. The steam engine is an amazing invention that can turn wheels and make things like, you know, a water-driven power loom work without the water. Okay, well, a little bit of water, but still. And then iron and steel production. Coke, which is purified coal, is starting to be mass produced. Okay, it burns hotter, burns longer, and it burns faster.
Wait. Like actual cocaine coke, or?
No. That's only for the Colombian steel. Everywhere else, it's coal that has all the impurities taken out of it. So it's just pure white, and it burns like, you know, really super hot. And then the Bessemer converter is made in 1856, which makes steel a lot cheaper and a lot faster and stronger. Once you have really strong steel by 1856, then you can start making a lot of infrastructure, like trains that cross the whole Siberian landscape in Russia. Okay, so you got cheap, strong steel coming out of the Bessemer converter, which is a way to make, you know, iron into steel. And the whole world starts popping. Go ahead and hit it. I think that's it for the industrial. Yeah. Here's the images of the Industrial Revolution. There's Bessemer. There's the looms for cotton industry. Go ahead. And I think, Catherine. Yeah. Okay. So this kind of shows you the whole setup for it. So here's spinning. There's weaving. How do you get from A to B? The machines get a lot heavier when you start to make factories to do this instead of by hand. Extra power is needed, so that creates the need to create steam engines are invented. See, necessity breeds what? Invention. And that's really the point of the Industrial Revolution. Necessity breeds invention. So once you have steam engines, then you have factories. You're allowed to do that, then you need to put the factories near a power source. That means that the workers have to come to you, and that transforms societies. And then you have urban overcrowding. Cities become much, much bigger. The countryside where most humans used to live is empty, and now the cities are wherever the human populations are. And then finally, because of all the problems of all that overcrowding, you have worker organization, government laws passed, and reforms, and the rise of unions by the 1880s.
If you said that before that people weren't didn't want the government to mess with industrialization,
Yeah.
why is the government coming into this now?
It's actually at the end. The governments don't get involved until the 1880s. Like, this started back in the 1600s, 1700, 1800s, about 200 years after industrialization. You've got little kids like that are 6 years old that have black lung because they're working in coal mines. You know, and the dust like seals their lungs and they die slowly. You got little children working in the spinning factories with these big machines, and they like little girls because they're short enough to walk under the machines and fix the strings when they break, but getting their arms ripped off, and the spinning jenny goes like this all day long with and the girl puts her hand in there and boom, the hand's gone. I mean, all of these accidents and all this horrible stuff. Work days, the common work day for the Industrial Revolution early on was anywhere from 15 to 20 hours a day. And for a half penny an hour, you're not going to make a lot. So, it was just a lot of unequal work conditions. Like the Industrial Revolution really firmly took advantage of the working class that needed the jobs, you know what I mean? So we see from 1880 to 1930s, the government getting involved finally across the world with these situations to apply laws to the economic system. So they did laissez-faire for a while, and it did serve its purpose, but so many people were suffering, the legal system had to come in. Okay, let's stop there because that's a good place to remember, and I'll finish this up either tomorrow or Thursday.